Hi, I'm Ashley Miller. I'm the Director of Career Services here at Lindsey Wilson College's main campus in Columbia, Kentucky. Today we're going to talk about writing a winning resume, some tips for success. We'll go through the different parts of a resume, what should and should not be included, and some helpful hints on to get your resume to the top of the stack. Now, what is a resume? A resume is a brief history of your accomplishments that prepare you for potential employers. Your resume should really be designed with one thing in mind, and that's to get you a job interview. A resume is basically the essence of who you are. It's where you've been, where you hope to go, and your accomplishments along the way. I want to show you a video really quick. It's from a gentleman named Rich Alexander. He is a writer and producer for SellYourSmarts.com, and he produced this amazing YouTube video, and he calls it the 10 Rules for Effective Resume Writing. So take a look at this real quick. Now, what is a resume consist of? A resume is something that is clear, well organized, dynamic, and above all, it's neat. A resume should be clear in that it's going to present the facts in an easy to read manner. You want to have it well organized so you can show your strengths to the reader at a glance. That's going to include things like your name, your objective, your education, your references, your work history, maybe some additional skills and activities that you've been involved in, some volunteer organizations. All of those are going to be the headers of the sections of your resume that are going to be nice and organized and together. Your resume also needs to be dynamic. The use of action verbs is really going to set you apart when you're doing your resume. Action verbs are going to show that you led this organization or you designed this sort of plan. By putting things in action verb context, you're really helping the reader of your resume to understand that you actively pursued these things during your past employment and you're ready to do them again. And don't forget, above all, your resume has got to be neat. If you're using Times New Roman here and Arial font here, and then you've got some Mono Corsica here, it really distracts the reader to not have a neat appearance. Your resume should be uniform with 1-inch margins all the way around. It needs to have headers, but it needs to not be distracting. Remember that your resume should show that you're proud of yourself and what you've done, and appearance counts. What does a good resume do? A resume, first of all, introduces you to your potential employers. It tells them why you're a qualified candidate for the position and why you deserve that interview. Now, once you're introduced to the employer through your resume, it's going to serve as a guide for the interviewer to discuss your background. The interviewer may not know you. They may not know all that you've accomplished, and maybe that internship that you did your freshman year of college, it had some wonderful qualities that will help you in the position that you're interviewing for. So that's one way that the interviewer is going to be able to guide themselves through your background and through your history while you're in that interview so they can see why you're best suited for the position. Alright, now let's get into what exactly should be included on your resume. First and foremost, you're going to have a header. Now, I usually recommend to students that you use the header setting in your Microsoft Office template or whatever program you're using. Your header should include your full name. Now, if you don't go by your full name, for instance, if my name was Lauren Ashley Miller, but I go by Ashley, then I would put an L, period, and then Ashley Miller. It just shows the employer that that's not my full name, but Ashley is what I prefer to go by. Although if your name is William and you prefer to go by Will, it's appropriate to still put your full name, which is William. You're also going to want to put your complete address. As much as we'd like you to stay at Lindsey Wilson College forever, you're not always going to live in Phillips Hall. So make sure that there's an address on the top of your resume where you're potential employer can always reach you. Also, a phone number where you can be reached. Everyone pretty much has a cell phone now, so make sure that your cell phone number is at the top of that resume, but that your voicemail is professional sounding. Go ahead and take off those. Please enjoy the music while your party's being reached. Music on your ringtones. We want everything to be as completely professional as we possibly can, but employers like to know that they've reached the right number. So avoid using just your phone number and actually tell them whose voicemail they've reached. Also, you want to put your personal email address on. Again, we would love you to stay at Lindsey Wilson forever, but that's not the reality of the situation. So make sure that you do a Gmail address, Hotmail, Live.com, Yahoo, whatever email service you prefer, but that it's in a easy to remember format that is appropriate. So in our example here, we have Jane Smith at collegetown.edu. Now that is a wonderful professional email address, whereas Crazy Party Girl is not such a good first impression to a potential employer. After you do your header, the next thing that's going to be on your resume is your objective. Now, what is an objective exactly? It's something that allows employers to determine what type of position that you're looking for. If you do include a job objective, avoid being vague. It wants you to target exactly what you're looking for. So if you're applying for a graduate assistantship, then in your objective you would say, to obtain a graduate assistantship in the field of blah, 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 whatever your field may be. Down here we have that a good objective would be a sales position in a growing retail organization, whereas a poor objective is a challenging position that uses my education and creativity. Now that's great and fluffy and everything, but it really doesn't tell me as a potential employer why you're applying for this job and what you're expecting out of it. Are you expecting it to be a full-time position, a part-time position? Are you looking for an internship opportunity or a temporary assignment? You want to be as specific as possible in your objective without being overly wordy, so keep it to one sentence. Now, what else do you need to include on your resume? You need to include your education. You need to put your highest degree earned at the top. So if you're graduating from Lindsey Wilson College with your master's degree and you have graduated from Lindsey Wilson College with your undergraduate, make sure that master's is on top. You always want to include the school that you went to the last. And if you have not graduated yet, remember to always put anticipated graduation date May 2012 or December 2013, whatever the case may be. Make sure that you list your major. If you have a double major, please put that on there. Or if you have a minor or a concentration in a certain area, put that on there as well. Your GPA is applicable if it's above a 3.0. If your GPA is not above a 3.0, or if you don't feel comfortable putting it on your resume, then please leave it off. It doesn't necessarily tell an employer, oh, they didn't have a 3.0 if it's not on there, but it's just another accolade in your favor. Also include any coursework that is related to the job that you're applying for, or any awards or scholarships or elected offices. If you were a part of student government, then put that you were, SGA president, or if you received the Bagley Scholarship, then make sure that you put those accomplishments on there. Now, after your education and training, you're going to start in on your work experience. This is going to vary from student to student based on how many internships you've done over the course of your work here at Lindsey, or how much seasonal employment you've had. Maybe you go home on the weekends and work at a job. It's just important to make sure that you say the name of the organization, where the organization is located, and what your job title was. If it's a number of different job titles, so say you've moved around in the organization, list each one of your job titles separately and the duties and accomplishments that you had with each one of those. And I'll show you an example of how to format your work experience. Your resume should also include your activities and your special skills. You might want to mention any leadership organizations that you've been involved in, any personal accomplishments. So maybe you paid your own way through college. That says a lot about your character and your drive. Or maybe you have some special abilities. Maybe you're fluent in Spanish, or maybe you taught Japanese students how to read English. Or you can do these special computer programming skills or web design. Make sure that you highlight those different skills and abilities. Alright, now let's start talking about a resume format. There are tons and tons of ways that you can format a resume. So don't think that because your resume looks different from the person next to you that yours isn't correct. There are lots of ways to format resumes that highlight your individual skills, and that's what we want to do. You always want to prepare more than one resume so you can tailor one to a specific job that you're applying for, and you can also have a generic one that you can send over to people in a hurry. Now, the resume format that I find most advantageous for our purposes is a chronological format. This is where you take your most relevant, most recent experiences and you place them on top and you go from there on down. An advantage to this type of format is that it gives a clear picture of where you've worked and your accomplishments in a logical, easy to read, easy flowing manner. It's a lot easier for an employer to see your most recent experience if it's on top. Alright, now that we know what type of format we're going to use, let's get into setting the right tone. You always want to emphasize the positive attributes of your employment, your school, your community. You really want to sell yourself in this resume. So we don't want to emphasize any negatives. For instance, maybe you were fired from a past position, or maybe you and your boss didn't get along too wonderfully. It's a wonderful way to show that you demonstrated conflict management and take that maybe negative experience and spin a positive attribute that you learned from that. We also want to highlight your accomplishments. You list your most important qualifications first. So if you just pass the praxis and you're going to be a teacher, then that's a wonderful accomplishment. Let's put that on top. Then maybe you're also CPR and first aid certified. Let's put that underneath of it. So you see where I'm going here, that if it's the most important for that particular position, you want it to be the very first thing that a potential employer sees. If you're a recent graduate or if you're still in school, list your education before your experience. It always helps for people to know that, yes, I'm either in the process of getting a degree or I already have a degree. Make sure you list your majors as well, and if you've been on the dean's list, put that on there too. It kind of helps if you don't have a lot of professional job experience yet to put underneath of that employment section. Highlighting your educational achievements is a wonderful way to get the ball rolling. Remember that you're going to want to use action verbs. Action verbs are going to show initiative. Remember we talked about managing a team, or you led this organization. Those are the kind of things that we're talking about. So if you use some verbs such as supervised, or you planned, developed, and created, those tell an employer precisely what you accomplished in an even more positive, go-getter kind of an attitude. And that's what we want to do. We want to also avoid using the same set of action verbs over and over again. So maybe you did a lot of assisting. Well, there's some other words that we can use for assisting that maybe mean the same thing in that task, and you want to kind of break it up. Otherwise, it looks like all you've done is what someone else told you to do, and that may be true, but we just want to break up the monotony of using the same words. Alright, we also want to use some familiar terms. So if an appropriate language is needed for a specific job, then go ahead and use it. So for instance, if you're applying to be a paralegal and you want to say that you can do dictaphone dictations, well, that's a familiar term in that industry, so that would be a wonderful thing to use in that instance for that type of job. Or perhaps you are a computer programmer and you want to talk about this computer language that you know and these different applications that you can use. You want to use those precise terms when you're applying for that kind of a job. And above all, I know I've said it before, but it needs to be neat. I cannot emphasize enough how much it turns off a potential employer to see coffee stains on the side of your resume, or if there was a smudge in the ink, or if maybe you used whiteout to correct something last minute and put a pen mark in it. That really distracts from the appearance, and we want them to read the content. We don't want them to be distracted by the appearance. So keep that in mind. Now, I am guilty of this. I am a wordy person. I really like to explain myself, but you have to remember in a resume that this is all about statements of direct nature. So you're wanting to say that you managed an organization and developed this team project. You don't want to tell them every single part of this team project and how you arrived at the conclusion and the bumps along the way. You want to save those things for your interview. So remember to avoid wordiness, use some verbal economy in there, and also try to eliminate I statements from your resume. You want to use this as an academic piece of writing, if you want to think of it that way, where you take out I and me statements and you replace them with those action verbs that we talked about. You always want to be honest in your resume. A skillful interviewer can spot exaggeration or falsehoods. So remember to always make it as positive as you possibly can without being dishonest. Nothing will get you kicked to the bottom of the pile or excused from an interview faster than being dishonest. So remember to always emphasize a positive thing that you learned out of a negative experience, but to never be dishonest about it. You also want to try to keep your resume as brief as possible. I always say that if you have won the Nobel Prize, then you need a second page. But otherwise, unless you have an extensive work background, then you want to try to keep your resume around one page. If your references are going to kick it over to a second page, then it's okay at the bottom of that first one to say additional references are available upon request. You don't want the second page to just be your references, so if that's the case, then that is perfectly appropriate to put. You also want to write your own resume. It sounds kind of silly, but we get requests all the time to write resumes for students, but no one knows you better than you know yourself. So you starting the process is really going to help us to help you finish it. Now remember not to use gimmicks. A lot of students think that beefing up their resume with some unusual formatting or some different colored paper may attract the attention of a potential employer, and it does, but the wrong kind of attention. Also, don't include your salary requirements on your resume. Now, this is something that you're going to be asked for a lot of different positions. They may ask you your salary requirements. That's something that you're going to say for your cover letter, not included on your resume. Also, don't include any unnecessary personal information like your race or your religion, your age, or your political affiliation or marital status. When designing your resume, leave a 1-inch margin on all sides. Now that's a standard APA style formatting. So it's the default setting in your Microsoft Word, so go ahead and use that. Don't mess with the margins. Use some capital letters and some boldface and bullets, but only when appropriate. And we'll go over a sample resume in a moment. You also want to type your resume. Use a computer and a printer that helps your resume appear as neat as it possibly can be. We have computers available for you in our Columbia campus, but if you're not able to make it to our Columbia campus, then that's okay. Email it over to us. We'll be glad to print it out for you on resume paper and send it to you in the mail so you've got some nice, clean copies. Also, when you're formatting your resume, make sure you use fonts with feet. I know it kind of sounds strange, but when you open up a textbook and you're reading through it, most of your textbooks are going to use Times New Roman or Georgia, some sort of font that has feet on it. And what the feet do is it helps your eye move along the sentence and not flub up with the different type of font. You also want to use a high quality paper with matching envelopes. Now I mentioned that we have resume paper, and I want you to utilize this service. Resume paper is expensive, and if you're only needing 1 or 2 copies of your resume and you have to go to Walmart and buy the resume paper pack that has 20 sheets in it, then you've got 19 or 18 extra sheets of high quality paper that you paid all this money for that are just going to sit in the drawer till your next job interview. So utilize this service. We're here to help. Now, after you've got your resume draft together, you really want to proofread it carefully. There cannot be enough proofreaders on your resume. You send it over to our office. I'll send it to maybe my graduate assistant will also read over it, or maybe your English professor can also read over it. The more eyes that you have on your resume, the better. Not only will we all catch your spelling mistakes and your punctuation and grammar, but maybe I didn't catch where a period should be, and Professor Jones can catch where that period should be. Not saying that necessarily one of us is more qualified than the other, but it's just when you're reading something, you need a lot of set of eyes to make sure that it is in the best format it could possibly be in. I'm going to show you a sample resume, and I want to see if you can find the errors in it. And by going over this resume, you're going to kind of see the process that I go through when I'm looking at your resume, and it'll help you in those initial planning phases. Okay, so here's a sample resume of Miss Amanda's student. So take a couple of seconds and glance over it, and then we'll go through it together. Okay, right up off the bat at the top, her name is really, really big compared to the other font on the page. Now, you certainly want your name to be in bold type or all caps, certainly larger than the other words on the page, but not so large that it's distracting. So when you go underneath, you notice that her address looks like it's her college address, which that's perfectly okay, but just make sure that you also include your permanent address as well. A lot of students that are still in school, for instance, if you're a junior or sophomore and you're putting out your resume, put your college address all the way to the left and your permanent address all the way to the right. That way you're differentiating them, but you're including both of them. Also, it's a good idea to go ahead and spell out the state. If you notice, Miss Amanda put PA, which is for Pennsylvania, but it just looks a little bit more finished and polished if you go ahead and spell out the whole state name. If you notice, she also has formatted her phone number incorrectly. President Lucky likes to tell this story where he applied for his first job at Lindsey Wilson College and he forgot to put his phone number on his resume. Luckily, they called one of his references who was able to give them his contact information, but what a potentially life-altering oversight to not include your correct phone number on your resume, or your phone number at all in President Lucky's case. So that's just one little oversight that you would want to correct. Dropping down to our education, I like to put the education as far up top on the resume as possible. Now, you notice Miss Amanda did not put an objective. That is okay. We would encourage you to put an objective on your resume, but she's chosen to start out with her education. She's got it in all boldface type, all uppercase, with a colon. Now, I would probably take out the colon, but leaving it in uppercase format is perfectly acceptable. You would also want to, though, drop down your education below the heading. Leave the heading on a line of its own. So we would have the education with her Bachelor of Arts in Advertising below that. She has put that her degree anticipated May 2012. I would rather see that formatted as anticipated graduation date May 2012. It's just a more polished way to say the same information. But do you notice that her GPA is a 283? Usually, unless your GPA is a 3.0 or higher, we recommend that you just don't include it on your resume. Alright, dropping down into her experience, what we like to do is have 25% of blank space on your resume and no more. So what we would do is we would take the dates of her employment and we would move it all the way to the right hand margin of the page. And what that does is it moves your eye across the page from left to right just as you were reading normally, and it spreads out the information. But I would recommend flip-flopping your the place of business with your title. The place of business should be in boldface type, whereas your title underneath of it should be in normal type but italicized. So you're saying that you were working for the company and this was your title. But we would also recommend that you take the New York, New York and put that all the way over to the right just as you just did your date. Down here, same thing. We would want to move the dates that we worked there all the way over to the right. Same thing down with our other work experience. And we would also want to flip-flop the coffee shop with what her title was. But if you notice, she's still working at this coffee shop. So we would want to also change the location of that work experience. So it's on top. So it follows our chronological format. Sorry, right before we get to our awards and achievements, the generic restaurant, her third work experience, it doesn't have what her title was or when she worked there. So that's something that we would want to add. Again, putting the name of the restaurant on top in boldface type, your title underneath of it in italics, and the location and the date you worked there all the way over to the right hand side of the page. If you also notice, she has placed this ABC Communications job into a paragraph format, but her other work experience are in bullets. One way or the other doesn't matter to us. Either way is completely correct, but you just want to be consistent throughout your entire document. So you want to either paragraph format or bullets, one or the other, but just not both. Also, if you look at the heading for her experience category, she has underlined it with a colon, so now it doesn't match any of the other headings, which is what we were going to talk about with this awards and achievements. It's in a completely different format than the others. It doesn't have the colon or the underline. Just pick one way or the other. Either one is fine, but you also need to be consistent with your spacing. So underneath experience, she has a blank space and then she starts into her experience, whereas under her awards and achievements, she just goes right into it. So we want to kind of create those spaces in between our information. Also, if you notice, this is in completely different font than everything else. It looks like it's probably an Arial font, although it's the same size. You want to keep your font consistent throughout the document. Doesn't have to be Times New Roman, but it does need to be some sort of sans serif that's got the feet on it. It just makes it a little easier to read and more polished. We drop down to our references. Again, you want to make sure that your heading is uniform throughout the document. But do you notice her reference has the same last name as her and lives in the same place? Um, so that kind of gives us a red flag that this is someone that is related to Amanda. Um, you want to put at least 3 references down, and a lot of students do work for their parents or for an aunt's or uncle's company, especially over the summer. But just choose someone else in the organization that is not related to you if you want to use someone from that place as a reference. So perhaps the office manager or someone else that was your supervisor was not related to you in that business. Put them rather than the person that is related. Even if they have a different last name, it's still kind of borderlines on the sketchy category. And again, with her address, she'll want to spell out Pennsylvania, and the phone number's formatted improperly, so you want to make sure your phone number's formatted properly, and you include an email address if possible. It's a quick way for references to be checked via email, and if they have an email address, put that down as well. Now, a lot of students talk to me about after you put down your email address, the default setting is for it to change to a blue and to underline. That's perfectly okay. It just hyperlinks it. Even if you print it out and you've got that blue at the bottom, it's perfectly okay. Thank you all so much for joining me today and talking about our resumes. If you have any questions or for more information on different services that Career Services offers, visit our website. It's just lindsay.edu/careers, and under the Resources for Student tabs, it's the all important part-time and full-time job postings area. Now, the quickest way to get the latest and greatest job postings is to either like us on Facebook or to follow us on Twitter. Usually our Facebook and our Twitter page update instantly, whereas the website takes a few days to update. So it's the latest and greatest way to get all of the job information that you're looking for. Also, just give us a call, shoot us an email. We'd be more than happy to help you in any way that we can with your job search or getting any of these career related tools under your belt. So thank you so much and have a wonderful day.